Simply, I did my work with all sincerity, and whatever I could achieve is God's grace. Um, Before I start making
Dr. Malik sir, please unmute yourself.
अनम्यूट सर, अनम्यूट कीजिए आपके माइक को। माइक माइक म्यूट हो गया सर। नीचे लेफ्ट साइड को होगा सर।
हाँ, यस सर।
यस, ठीक है सर, ठीक है।
Good evening, everybody. At the outset, I thank my esteemed colleague, National Fellow Dr. YPS Malik, for his kind words of appreciation. I'm really humbled, and whatever I could achieve in my life, I owe to the lotus feet of God Almighty and the best wishes of all my well-wishers, seniors, and teachers. At the outset, I express my sincere thankfulness to Indian Veterinary Association, the RACON platform, and its Honorable Chairman, President Dr. Chirantan Kadian, and all office bearers, Dr. S. Umesh, Dr. Mahesh Yadav, Dr. Daya. Before I start making my presentations, I would like first to pay my reverence in the lotus feet of God Almighty. So I may be permitted. Om Shri Guru Parbrahma Devadidev Shri Mahadev Namo Namah. Om Shri Adi Shakti Namo Namah. Om Pratham Pujya Shri Ganeshaya Namah. Om Shri Saraswati Namah. Om Shri Guruve Namah. Om Shri Panch Mahabhuteshwar Namo Namah. Om Shri Yogadhara Namo Namah. Today I will be making my presentations through these almost 85 slides. Quickly I will go through so that I respect the time. At the outset, I welcome all my colleagues who have joined me in esteemed deans, head of the divisions, faculty members, participants from different parts of the country, including the esteemed faculty members and my students who are holding very key positions in various organizations, my dear friends in media and press, and most important, all the stakeholders and all the budding scientists and teachers in my dear students. I am making my presentation on this important topic, which is need of the hour, the COVID-19 pandemic, a veterinary perspective under One Health. Is it moving, my slides? Hello?
Yes sir, you can move by cursor. Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes.
Today, as we all know, this is the situation as on today. The time bomb of coronavirus is tickling fast, and the world cases are touching 8 lakhs in the coming days. It is expected with deaths more than 4,28,723. India is also, the cases are surging like anything. Last week we were at 7th position, but today at 4 p.m. when I have looked at the statistics, there are 3 lakhs plus cases in India with 8,890 deaths, surpassing Spain and Italy. So global health systems are struggling actually to cope up with COVID-19. Hospitals are full, and obviously there are need of ventilators and other supports. So it's a great challenge. Even the best countries in the world are not in position to coping up with this growing threat of an emerging disease of zoonotic nature. It is converting gyms to wards, preparing for a pandemic. Reminds of 1980 influenza pandemic at Iowa State University. It 2020 coronavirus pandemic at Yale. And you can see here that influenza virus 1918, there was a social distancing, main mitigation, treatment with convalescent sera, BCG vaccine existed but not used. No ventilators were available at that point of time, no diagnostic testing possible with low symptomatic carrier rate. Whereas in case of corona, social distancing still remains a main mitigation. Treatment with convalescent sera is available. The use of BCG vaccine, which is claimed to have a very beneficial effect. Ventilators are available, but still very high mortality, greater than 80. And virus RNA extraction, qPCR and serology for IgM and IgG, all can be done. But a high asymptomatic carrier rate, that is as high as 75% even in some cases, is a main challenge. There is no flattening of the curve in near future that we were expecting, but it is not there. Cases are going up and up with increased mortality. What is flattening of curve? We can see here that if this is uncontrolled transmission, then application of the prompt control measures, if we take in the beginning itself, this is the most crucial thing for any country. But if you got late, then it will lead to uncontrolled transmission. And obviously, the capacity of the healthcare systems globally is at risk. And they are not in position to cope up with even the best in the world like US, UK, Australia, Italy, and Spain. But if we put it in place in timely manner, then transmission with control measures actually goes down and we expect that flattening of the curve. Why social distancing has been advocated to flatten the epidemic curve of COVID-19? Because in an epidemic, we care not only about how many people are eventually infected, but also about how many people are infected at the same time. So availability of the intensive healthcare facilities is highly valuable for seriously ill patients. Social distancing strategy is the key for success. As we can see in this slide, that some of the key questions that are regarding the basic reproduction number and the mortality. Here, the graph shows on left the fatality rate on log scale with regard to bird flu, MERS, Ebola, and SARS, and smallpox. As it goes up, more deadly is the virus. But here, if we see in case of Spanish flu, it was here. And now new coronavirus, where most estimates put the fatality rate below 3%, but it is going more than 6 in many countries, and the number of transmission between 2 to 4. So it spreads faster, and at the same time, it is deadly also. That's why it is a combination which is really lethal. Failed lab experiments to bat and pangolins, theories around the origin of COVID-19. How does an epidemic spread and what does the wildlife trade have to do with it is a big question the whole world is asking to China, from where it has emanated and spread to the whole world. In fact, it's worth billions of dollars to organize crime after guns, drugs, and human trafficking, what we call as a wet market in China and many other countries. So a Nobel laureate has made this statement that failed lab experiment to bat and pangolins. He said that it is man-made in Wuhan lab, but many say that it has originated from the bats, and then somehow it has got intermediate host still that is missing. Scientists world over are struggling to get that clue, but still it is invisible. And then finally, it has come to the human for human-to-human transmission on Earth. So obviously there are not many controversial statements, views point. So not going into that, actually the current biology, which is probable pangolin origin of SARS-CoV-2 associated with COVID-19 outbreak. Here the virus which was isolated in 2013, that has a resemblance with novel coronavirus 96.2%, but still there is a 4% gap. So the pangolins cannot be considered as a prime reservoir of this virus. Genomic studies point to the natural origin of COVID in obviously bats. Now we look at that if the virus is being maintained here in the wild settings, which is disturbed by human ventures, it crosses the species barrier, and then from wild it goes to livestock, and animals are sold in the wet market. And then from these so many domestic species, if it is spilled over, then cross species transmission starts. And then we are still looking out what was the intermediate host in between these two. And finally, the zoonotic starts. And what is most disastrous and what is most feared of is the community transmission. Obviously, lot many people are getting hospitalized and hospitals are full and people are being denied the admissions in the hospital for the want of necessary medical facilities. Nosocomial transmission is putting the medical fraternity at high risk, and many have lost their life while serving the mankind in this endeavor to save them. And adding to the problem, the air traffic today is really has added the fuel to its spread on a global scale. COVID-19 initially it was thought that younger adults are at risk to the COVID-19 patients get double lung transplant. So this shows that how much extensive damage it is causing. And the surgeon said that damage was among the worst he had seen. I have divided my talk into three themes. The first, the COVID-19, and the most recent scientific clues that we got and everybody should know in order to protect themselves and others. And second is the link to the nature in the form of biodiversity. And finally, to link both the things with the One Health. So as for the 1918 Howard University germ experiment, which says that when he sneezes or coughed, they were infected for 12 feet. So here, the moral is that you must wear your own mask. And this was relevant at that point of time in 1980, and it is relevant even today. So COVID-19, why we should wear a mask? There is a new scientific rationale that has homemade masks, that may be surgical masks, which are most of the people wear, and the most protective N95 respirator mask. How the droplets can transfer the pathogen, here you can see in this picture that cough travels at the rate of 10 meters per second. And whatever is the larger droplets, they fall within the range of 1.5 to 2 meters. But if sneeze comes, it goes further because with a kind of exhalation, forced exhalation, the virus particle in the form of aerosols that are less than 10 micron, they are taken to the as long as 6 meters. So practically, we are not safe up to this area. So droplets are larger, but aerosols are very, very light, and they can travel to the longer distances when the wind velocity is high. So when expelled at very high velocity through coughing and sneezing, especially larger droplets can be carried by the jet more than 2 meters or 6 feet, you say. So anatomy of airways, where droplets can end up, and what droplets are blocked by what mask. It is a crucial question because whenever we go for masks, we need to know which mask can actually save us. So here, as we know that most of the ACE2 receptor to which the virus binds, they are located in the upper respiratory tract. And of course, the virus can infect the lung, the bronchi and alveoli in the lungs. So here, most important thing that how many virions or virion particles we are inhaling or expelling if we are infected. So here the cough or sneezes droplets, they reach beyond 2 meters or 6 feet. So, but those molecules or which are larger than 10 micron can be blocked by surgical mask. So whatever is going to stuck in the upper respiratory tract can be blocked by if we are using surgical mask. But those which are very small in nature, as it is from 50 to 200 particle size is very, very small. So it is practically 0.05 to zero point 0.2 micrometer of the virus size. So obviously the smaller particles can go directly to the lungs. So there only this mask N95 is of avail. Filtering effect of small droplets or aerosols by various masks. You can see again, this is important that if you are making a homemade, using a homemade mask or a surgical mask or N95 equivalent mask, and particles produced in the environment are 100, then how many particles are leaked through the mask? It means if I am infected or you are infected, how many particles will pass through these? You can see here again the N95 mask is the most efficient one. Similarly, protecting when it comes to protecting others means outward protection. So here again, the particle produced by coughing, particles leaked into environment out of 90, 100, it is 90 in case of tea cloth or homemade mask, 50 in case of surgical mask, and 30. So again, these particles are trapped, and least are 30 are leaked into environment. And from environment, if we are using N95 mask, only one particle has got a chance to get entry into our system. So here it is the major route of the viral entry is large droplets that land in nose where viral entry receptors is highest. This transmission route could be effectively blocked by the simple masks that provide a physical barrier. So what it takes to infect? CDC has recently brought these important vital statistics that only 1,000 virus particles are needed. So when we simply breathe, 20 virus particles per minute are exhaled. When speaking, it goes to 200 virus particles per minute. But when we sneeze, it becomes in millions. 200 millions in sneezing and more than 200 millions in cough. So enough of these may retain in hours in a poorly or air ventilated environment. So here the key is this, that if even the virus particles are less, but it is a closed area, then people are at great risk of contracting the infection. So we should avoid staying inside when we are talking or to someone interacting, but rather we should go in the open and interact. This is the CDC guidelines released on May 22, and this is very important. And I think these are the guidelines everybody should remember and practice in order to keep themselves safe as well as educate others. Here, if we are in the vicinity of someone, even within 6 feet of distance, low risk is there if we limit to less than 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Talking to someone face to face with mask, low risk, if limit to 4 minutes. So here period is important. Someone passing you or walking or jogging, cycling, again low risk. Well ventilated space with distancing is the low risk, limited duration. But if you go to the shopping, to the grocery, medium risk, that can be reduced to low by limiting time and following hygiene. Indoor spaces, if we prefer to stay indoors, like in malls, in public places, in bathrooms, common areas, restaurants, the risk is high, but it can be reduced to minimum by sitting outdoors with distancing. But actually all the schools, workplaces, even with the social distancing which is being advocated, people stand at a very high risk because there is chances of high fomite transfer risk. Parties, weddings, business networking, conferences, they must be avoided because there we stand at a very high risk in arenas, concerts, and cinemas as well. COVID-19 and animals. Now, I'm coming to the veterinary perspective. Two important questions always are posed to us as a veterinarian, whether domestic animals can be infected with SARS-CoV-2 or whether they could serve as a fomite for SARS-CoV-2. What do we know actually? Can I give the virus to my pets? Can I give the virus? Can I get the virus from my pets? How can I keep my pets safe? And can I give the virus to my pets? Yes, but not easy. Answer is 7.7 million people are infected and only 6 known pets have been infected as on today. So dogs, 31 pet dogs tested, only 3 tested positive with one symptom, and 22 pet cats tested, but only 3 tested positive with respiratory symptoms. So this is the answer. So answer is no, a big no. Animals do not pose a major threat, and there is no known case where a person become infected with COVID-19 from their pet. But again, the disease dynamics still will take years to unravel, and then only we will be in position to know the exact epidemiology of the disease. How can I keep my pets safe is an important question. So keep pets indoor, wash your hands. Again, social distance at the dog park, wash your hands. Isolate 2 and 4-legged family, means we should isolate ourselves with the pets if you are COVID-19 positive, and wash your hands. Scientific evidences say that there is no, as on today, there is no evidence that livestock are infected. No studies were found that evaluated fur, skin, or hides as a source of transmission from pets or livestock for SARS-CoV-2, MERS-CoV-2, or SARS-CoV-2. One exception is there that SARS-CoV-2 has been shown to survive on room temperature and pig skin in phosphate buffered saline and is stool for greater than 24 hours. Again, COVID-19 in animals, if we look at all reported cases where SARS-CoV-2 virus has been detected in cats who had been living in the close quarters with the infected owners. So basically the infection in animals have come from the infected handlers or their owners. So 2 cats and 2 dogs have been reported to have SARS-CoV-2 virus as detected by PCR. In 1 dog, the virus isolation has been reported. No case of cat or dog to human transmission has been reported, and 15 of 102 cats in Wuhan, China have been reported as positive for SARS-CoV-2 antibodies by ELISA. But the real reason veterinarians gave a tiger a COVID-19 test, as we know, everything came into limelight when the tiger tested positive. This is important. Another study which has been just 2 months back has been reported in Science, susceptibility of ferrets, cats, dogs, and other domestic animals to SARS-CoV-2. Here, most important, I have put the gist of the study for your information, please. Ferrets and cats are the permissive to infection. SARS-CoV-2 uses ACE2 as its receptor to enter the cell. So these receptors are actually present in abundance in the upper area in the ferrets and cats. So that's why they are at risk of contracting the infection. In ferrets, ACE2 is mainly expressed in the type 2 pneumocytes and serous epithelial cells of tracheobronchial submucosal glands. Here the difference in cat and the ferrets is this, that in ferrets basically the infection was localized in the upper respiratory tract, the tonsils, the nasal septums, and the upper respiratory tract area. But in case of cats, the infection has been noticed in the lungs. So ferrets and cat have only 2 amino acid difference in the SARS-CoV-2 spike contracting region. Probably that may be the reason for this discrepancy. So experimentally, cats are susceptible to airborne infection. This is the conclusion of the study. SARS-CoV-2 is poorly replicates in dog, pigs, chickens, and ducks. Of course, these receptors have also been reported in gorillas, chimpanzees, and sheep. So it would be interesting to see in the time to come that how this virus behaves in these species of wild and domestic settings. So experimental was in this study actually experiment was designed where in direct contact with COVID-19 infected animal, these were the healthy animals and these were the indirect contact. So if you see in this study, virus was isolated after direct contact from nasal wash, saliva, urine, and feces. So all the 6 ferrets got infected and seroconverted. It means it is the ideal laboratory animal that should be used for COVID testing. And virus was isolated after indirect contact. So direct contact, all 6 were positive. But in case of direct, indirect, out of 6, 2 were positive, 1 in nasal wash, and 1 tested positive in feces. So one virus can change the globe. this is a classical example, and this is a interesting quote I have put before you, that whoever said one person can't change the world probably never ate and undercooked bad. That's the scenario, especially in the wet market, which is illegal largely world over, including many countries like China, especially. So COVID-19, it is humbling to remember that it all started when one person got infected by one wild animal. So obviously, the humans are encroaching into their domain, and that's why they are spreading, first contracting the infection and then spreading it across the globe. Here, the biodiversity is very important, and it is gaining now a renewed interest and renewed importance in the world scenario, because the biodiversity rich countries are saved from zoonotic diseases. How? That I am going to discuss. India, fortunately, is one of the 17 mega diversity countries. It has about 6.42 of the global fauna, and it has got 313 species of animal and 186 of plants that have been discovered from various parts of the country in 2016. Of the new animal species, 258 are invertebrates and 55 are vertebrates. For the first time, the number of animal species in the country crossed 1 lakh. Indian biodiversity, if you look at the same time, we lose. It is also lost because the trees are cut and forest fires are becoming common, losing to every year we lose around 1200 crores rupees. But we can stop it by various approaches, creating sustainable communities with increased residential density, integrated transportation and land use, tar-free areas and locally owned stores, walkable neighborhoods and accessibility. Same way, it is a happy situation that India is a home to 75% of the total tigers that are scattered in 30 countries. It's really the nation's pride. And fortunately, according to the latest census, as we celebrate International Tiger Day on 29th July, there was 33% rise in the tiger population compared to the 2014, and it was double as compared to the 2006. In this COVID era, I should say all these things in blessings in disguise. When the Gauraiya we used to look at and used to see commonly in our home is now coming back because the environment is getting clean. As a veterinarian, we are proud to serve the animal kind. That is very noble, but very few of us are aware of their actual contribution. I would like to talk about leopards consumes nearly 1,500 feral dogs per year, thereby reducing injury rates and potentially saving approximately 90 human lives. Vulture story is known to
Please
us.
loudly. Please loudly.
Am I not audible? Hello?
Yes, audible, sir, audible.
Okay.
Clear. Voice is clear, sir.
Old gyps vulture, which were lost once upon a time, almost 98%. Now, thanks to the Baha'is group, Parsi, who have had to their breeding in Pinjore and several other places. And now they are coming back in great numbers, because as their number declined, the anthrax cases has gone up, because they are the natural scavengers God has gifted to us. Bats may eat as many as 600 small insects per hour, or you can say 500,000, that is 5 lakhs per day. It's beyond mind-boggling and beyond any imagination. And the barn owl, it consumes 99% of the crop pests. You may recall this locust attack in Pakistan, India, and all the countries. So it reduces their population by 33%. And in Saudi Arabia, interesting experiment was done where owls were trained to reduce the rats' menace. And they are the natural scavengers. So without disturbing the nature, we can control the pests and other things which are harming the mankind or animal kind. Amphibian larvae feed aggressively on dengue mosquito. This is one of the natural control for the arboviruses. In spotted hyena, nearly 90% of studied hyena were located at waste dumps. So they clear the waste, which otherwise is source of foodborne infections. Actually, 5 extinctions have already occurred, but we are in the midst of 6th extinction. You can see here the 30% of the all birds, they have been already threatened, and among these wild mammals, 25% are threatened, and here also among the amphibians, actually they are the highest endangered, 41% are threatened. Now you can see here, the flowering plants are at the maximum risk because they are threatened maximally. And so is this situation here in case of these insects. Now these are the fungus, these are crustaceans and non-flowering plants, mollusks, fishes and reptiles. This gives you an idea that man-made disasters have actually led to the extinction of these species, which were only 515. Now 443 species of vertebrates that have already disappeared since 1900. 515 are on the brink. So total will become more than 1050. Here you can see the maximum damage here. If you see the fire in Amazon jungles, it is devastating the natural biodiversity. And here you can see, this is the scale. So maximum damage is at the low in blue color and minimum at the top. So here also India, we are quite, at risk, threat of biodiversity. What is most alarming that now what has occurred naturally, the extinction, the damage is being occurring at the 100 times more. Every year for the last century, we lost the same number of species typically lost in 100 years. This is really, really alarming. Some 543 vertebrates have already lost and 515 are at the brink. So obviously, the threat is, mind is highly disturbed. Bats, if you look at, the world is divided into two communities. Number one, those who say that it should be saved because it is very important, although it is the house or reservoir of many viruses in the wild settings. But we have ventured into their area, they have not into ours. So some curious facts I would like to put before you, that 4,000 species of birds are around. This is the only flying mammal, and recent review which has come yesterday night only says that the 22, they constitute 20% of the all mammal species. They have got diversity. It is incredible in case of bats, including insects, fruit, nectar. Some even eat fish, frogs, and birds. So they are the scavenging mammals in the nature. They have unusual long lifespan for their small size. They have echolocation, so they can precisely target their prey. And as you know, radar has been invented because of this natural gift that they move with the help of waves. Hibernation is the quality, and they form some of the largest gatherings of the mammals on the planet, like the Bracken Cave you can see here on your left, and have a unique immune system because of their evolution for flight. When word over, some of the groups, they decided to eliminate the bats, thinking that it is the largest reservoir. Probably the God Almighty came to their rescue, and we know that now bats are the unique creature in the whole universe who have got their immune system 24 hours on. 24 hours on. That's why they are home to several viruses and bacteria, but they themselves do not get infected. And scientific wisdom taken out of this is this, that one day if mankind identifies that gene and we are able to transfer it, no vaccination will be required because our immune system will be always on and we can fight any threat of microbial nature. This is the ranking of major threat types. These are the species that are actually threatened. So you can say here that a total of 170, 94% of the assessed are threatened species, and mainly because of logging and harvesting plants. Because of the climate change, actually, the floods come, so many torrential rains come, there are famines, and that's why so many trees are uprooted. So they actually they are losing their natural habitat very fast in the form of tree and agriculture and the hunting and collecting animals. These are, you can see, are the biggest threat to the survival of the bats. And that's why they fight with each other for food and shelter. In the process, when they are stressed, then only in their what we call as bat guano, the viruses are excreted. And then even in the best biosafety setting and biocontainment area, these flying fox will be discharging the viruses in those arenas and causing the disease, like they have caused the Hendra virus outbreaks in the Australia, and likewise they have caused the Nipah virus outbreak in Malaysia. The studies show that bats even more than 70% of their weight in insects. Can you imagine? Each night. And some pregnant females even at 100% of their body weight. That's a lot of insects. Really incredible. A single little brown bat can eat up to 1,000 mosquito-sized insects in single hour. So production of at least 1/3 of the world's food, including 1/3 of the world food, including 87 of the 113 leading food crops, are pollinated by bats. So they are the most wonderful creature which belong to our phylum. And this ecosystem service is worth more than $200 billion per year. So take home message is that why biodiversity is important. High biodiversity actually serves as a buffer against disease transmission by several mechanisms, including reducing the population density of an important natural reservoir, as we see in case of bats for pathogens. Second, reducing the population density of arthropod vector by pathogens, as zoophilic mosquitoes, for example, JE and dengue, they are diverted to other species if they are available. So they won't feed on humans. And third, the reducing encounter rates between vectors and reservoir or among reservoirs. For example, Lyme disease. So Lyme disease, if other species are available in the wild settings, the ticks will be feeding onto them and not onto the humans, because now these are the emerging diseases. And this phenomena is called as dilution effect, by which the high diversity reduces disease risk. Obviously, the biodiversity in one line, if I say, is related to the human beings who are part of the nature and have personal and biological connections to preserve, and biodiversity constitutes an effective barrier to zoonosis. This is the underlying point. What factors are increasing zoonosis emergence? Obviously, deforestation, antimicrobial resistance, intensified agriculture and livestock production, and illegal and poorly regulated wildlife trade, and of course, climate change. So here the degradation of the ecosystem services increases the likelihood of the zoonotic transfer. This is a chart which shows that right from 1980 to 94, if we come to 2005 and 2009, these outbreaks of diseases have increased, as you can see from this less number. This is the classification with regard to the pathogen type. This is the classification with regard to the host type, whether human specific or zoonosis. This is outbreak by transmission mode, means this is vector-borne, dark lines, and this is non-vector. So gradually from this 1980-84 to 2005 and 9, this shows that these have risen by alarming rates. And that's why we have to think why it is so. So we should remember that pathogens do not respect species boundaries. Now this is again a new paper has listed that 53 infectious agents, all with zoonotic potential, were reported to be carried by commensal rats. So these are the bacterial, parasitic, and rickettsial pathogens that are listed, including viral ones here, and the disease they cause. According to the various studies, including 2012 by Hillary and the zoonosis hotspot mapping, you can see here that India has been reckoned because of the high density of high population of mankind, of animal kind as well, but they are living in the close vicinity because we are not having a space to accommodate both the human and animal population. So important drivers of zoonosis emergence are deforestation, land use, loss of wildlife, biodiversity, dense human population, and interaction of human and wildlife. This is typical in case of India. And that's why we have been recognized as the topmost hotspot for zoonosis. So what are emerging diseases we quite often talk about, but by definition, if those diseases are not occurred before, like SARS in 2003 and COVID-19 in present era, this is emerging because they never occurred. And if they have occurred previously, but not affected only small number, they have affected only small number of people in isolated places, but now rapidly increasing in incidence or geographical range like Zika. It was discovered long back, way back in 1947, but epidemic was recorded in 2015-16. Then it is also it is termed as emerging infection or those infections which have occurred throughout the human history, like the causative agent of Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, but not, they have only recently been recognized as distinct disease. So emerging zoonosis, if we just, I am putting the glimpses before you that 60% of existing human infections are zoonotic in nature. In fact, 61%. Out of 1,415, 1415, zoonotic is human infections, 868, that is 61% are zoonotic in nature. But most important that 75% of these emerging infections like Ebola, HIV, influenza, they have an animal origin. And 5 new human diseases appear every year, and 3 of them are animal origin. And 80% of agents with potential bioterrorism like anthrax, plague, and so many viral agents, they are of potentially bioterrorism origin. So if we are able as a veterinarian to recognize those diseases and to stop them there itself at the source, obviously we will be doing a great service to the mankind, to the nation, because we don't allow a chance to spill over those pathogens to the humans. But once they are spilled over, it is next to impossible to contain those diseases as you are seeing in case of COVID settings. Now, again, this is another recent publication where the pathogen transfer with regard to the wild species, you can appreciate that out of 95 zoonotic viruses, 91% were transmitted from wildlife. 24 from both by wild and domestic, only 8 by domestic animals. This implies that in total 65% are uniquely derived from wild animals. It has been recognized that between 2000 and 2030, this is recent, that 25 emerging or re-emerging infections, diseases, threats are linked to wildlife. So wildlife is it must be kept in the wildlife settings only. So more than 300 emerging infectious diseases have been identified since 1940. It's a great number. And UNEP 2016 recognized that global increase in zoonotic epidemics is closely linked with the environmental changes, and one new infectious human disease is emerging every 4 months. This highlights that how much is the role veterinarians as a professional can play by containing these infections in the wildlife settings, in the domestic settings. Unfortunately, here it's an interesting quote I would like to say. Please read the following bottom line. In fact, if one person is unkind to an animal, it is considered to be cruelty. But where a lot of people are unkind to the animals, especially in the name of commerce, the cruelty is condoned. And once large sums of money are at stake, will be defended to the last by otherwise so-called intelligent people. This is the, I should say, a dilemma and agony. And we have now entered into age of what we call as livestock farming, without looking into the animal welfare issues who serve to our needs till they breathe last. So we have to be kind, veterinarians are, but we need to educate the society as well, that please be kind to the animals. To add to this fury, earlier we used to travel the whole globe. It used to take around 80 days by air. And this time has been now with huge network across the globe has been reduced to just 8 hours. And so The infected humans and animals are carried to the distant parts where it was not possible earlier, along with the vectors, ticks, mosquitoes, rats, and everything. So what is the likely culprit? Unsustainable urbanization, wildlife interaction, global trade, climate change, and emerging resistance. So scientific reports basically say that it is the spillover and pandemic properties of zoonotic viruses with high host plasticity. It means if a virus is finding the place in, or any pathogen is finding a place in number of species, its chances to spill to human are less because it's distributed. But otherwise, once it comes from this wild setting to animal to human, spillover, then application by human to human, and finally, we see the global spread. Why RNA viruses are a favorite candidate for global pandemics? Here I would like to show this slide that out of many DNA, bacteria, double-stranded virus, single-stranded viruses, the RNA viruses are fast to mutate because they are primarily agents for 44 of all EIDs, 44%. Most common class of pathogen behind new human disease at the rate of 2 to 3 novel viruses being discovered each year. So that is the something alarming about the RNA viruses. And then higher probabilities to infect new host species with exceptionally shortened generations time, rapid evolutionary rates due to frequent error-prone replication cycles, and that leads to mutation. The rate is 6 times greater than those their cellular hosts and 5 times of some of the DNA viruses. And that's why they are causing a lot of problems. Now, pathogens are under also transition due to global change, host factors are being changed. So earlier, the measles was in this category, which was coming down. But actually, in 2000 only, it has led to the 1,40,000 deaths. These are not cases, mind it. These are deaths. And this is the long list, which is going up and up and up. Whereas the success story is very little. If you take smallpox, is the truly successful story because eradication was confirmed in 1979. It was officially confirmed in 80. And Guinea worm, yes, this is a big leap. The cases has been reduced from in 3 million in 1986 to reduced to only 54 in 2019. Yours, 15 countries, which again caused disfiguration of the organs, currently endemic in 15 countries still, although the deadline set was 2020. Still, 80,000 suspected cases have been reported in 2018. Poliomyelitis, yes, success story. India is also has been congratulated. Decreased by over 99% since 1988, but Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria are still a hell of a problem. Leprosy, again, 2 lakhs more cases have been reported in 2018. Again, the goal is to 2020 for elimination. And neonatal tetanus, actually, from 2000 it was tried, and up to 2000, still 14 countries have yet to achieve maternal and neonatal tetanus elimination, although 45 countries have achieved it. So the list is by not any means to be exhaustive, and there is no way to keep the lid on Pandora's box. What you can't predict is what's going to come. What you can definitely predict is that something will. Now coming to the last part of my presentation, what is One Health? Because people talk without understanding the biodiversity, the wildlife component into it, and rather we are trained, groomed, and we are habituated to work in isolation, in compartmentalization. We talk on tables of One Health as if a new wine in old bottle. Problem is this, that we fail to appreciate that diseases, they do not respect their boundaries, national or international. And unless we join our hands, we cannot fight these menaces. We have to be what comes in between, the professional egos, personal egos, and the vested interest. If we shun off these 3 stigmas, then probably we can really, if we see our goal is common, we can definitely work together on an honest note. Now, One Health, if you see, these are the definitions. 4 important organizations have given the definition that are before you. And the underlying point is here is collaborative effort. It may be effort of multiple health sciences to attain optimal health. It may be a collaborative or international cross-sectoral or multiple mechanism. So it may be effort or mechanism to address threats and reduce risk, or it may be a collaborative or all-encompassing way to address the animal and public health globally, or it may be collaborations and communications in all aspects of healthcare. The cruxes of the problem is this, that unless all the related agencies, they genuinely, honestly join their hands, the problem will be like that only. In fact, people are addressing to the One Health issue just to churn the money out of it, because a lot of funding is going on to this because of the changing scenario, but not on a non-honest deed to work together. So under the One Health umbrella, if you see environmental health, ecology, veterinary medicine, public health, human medicine, molecular and microbiology, health economics, they all come. And then we have to interact at individual health level, to the population health level, and to the health systems. On one hand, we have to deal with the zoonotic infections, which are coming in a big way in a form of antimicrobial resistance, biothreats, and global health, in the form of bacterial, viral, vector-borne, and parasitic infections. And in fact, under the food safety is another area, very important area, which is linked in the form of foodborne zoonotic pathogens. So these are the tools to address them: surveillance, vector control, vaccines, sanitation, intervention in this form. On the other hand, the comparative medicine and translational medicine, what we do in the lab, achieve in the lab, whether it is being taken to the field settings, is these. And basically, this component deals with the non-infectious diseases, like metabolic disorders in human and animals, like cardiac diseases, nutritional diseases, cancers, cardiovascular disease, joint and skeletal disease, human-animal bond, environmental hazard. So the concept that has become an approach that became a movement. In fact, why it is important? We are not, even otherwise, because of our common habitat and dependence on each other, but actually we are genetically linked. If the genetic similarity, most of you might be knowing that between human and human is 99.9%, might be knowing that chimpanzee is related to 96%, but it is difficult. Only some know that mouse is related even to up to 85%, and a cow, only cow is linked to up to 80%, and even chicken is 60%. So my point is here that in 1932, the publication on One Health were just minimum, which has come up to 970 in 1980. But in 2020, 75,533 in 2019. Forget about 1920. This will be crossing, I am sure, 1 lakh figure. Why? Not only to work together. Some honest hearts, some honest people are working actually by using this concept, which is age old. Rudolf Virchow has, James Steele has perpetuated it, founded it. Calvin W. Chauvet has. So all these gems in scientists, they long back have said that we have to live in harmony with the nature. Emerging zoonosis, this I have talked about, and trends in pathology says that probably these zoonosis figure may be some bit may be on higher side, but here it is important that sapronosis, a distinctive type of infectious agent, actually those they have been put under zoonotic fungi. But even then, this is by any yardstick a very, very serious threat. And these are the drivers which you all know. The Japanese encephalitis has been linked to the irrigated rice production, Nipah, to intensification of pig farming, and actually these bats, they come here and chew the fruits, which are again eaten by pigs, and they die and transmit the infection to human. Lyme disease, again, the jungles are being cut and the ticks are venturing into other areas in search of their newer hosts. Rabies, as you see, vampire bats, again, the trees are dislocated. So they are going and attacking in South America to human and other animals. and emergence of bat-associated viruses, they emerge due to loss of, as I earlier said, bat habitat. And likewise, SARS, avian influenza, you also know that avian influenza is linked to the intensive poultry farming. So whenever they come, these viruses get spillover from the wild birds, and we see the outbreak. So basically, the concept of disease transmission, that till it remains at a stage only in animals, no problem. But stage 2 is a primary infection when in wild setting, say simian malaria or any infection, Nipah, Hendra, all that, Ebola, all are linked and COVID to when they go to the human. The second stage only from animals it comes.
तो
The
कैंसिल कर ले
third stage, limited outbreak from human to human.
क्या है ये
Stage is long outbreak from monkey to human, and last stage, as we are seeing here in case of COVID, is animal, is human to human, where only humans are the source and they are spreading. So basically, if you see here at the ground level in pink color, this is all the wild settings. So these bats, rodents, monkeys, and so many others, they actually infection remains there. So if you don't disturb them, the infection will be circulating in them only, infectious agent. But otherwise, if we venture into their area with the help of vectors or with the infection will be spilled over. Likewise, the animals are sent for grazing into the jungle. So these are spilled over to the domestic animals, and then they replicate in domestic animals, and from domestic animals or from wild animals, when they come to the human beings and they replicate there, then it becomes a outbreak which may assume the global propositions in the form of pandemic. So crux of the problem is that human, animals, and environment, we all have shared health. Shared to the extent that shared with animal are 61%. If you see most common infectious disease, and not known which are not shared are still 40%. What has added to the problem is the speed of human activities, air travel, this intensification of agricultural activities and livestock farming, what we even call as integrated farming. We are putting the ducks, the poultry, the fish, and everything there in one setting. Obviously, we are propagating in the name of integrated farming the intermixing of the species, which favors the very easy transfer of the zoonotic pathogens in that setting, and ultimately it leads to huge losses that are visible in the form of SARS outbreak or avian influenza outbreak and Nipah, and soon the statistics will be available for COVID. Another time bomb we are sitting on is the antibiotic resistance, and especially the nosocomial setting. I would advise all my colleagues to educate others that they should not carry their children to the hospitals, because ICMR study has said that Klebsiella, Acinetobacter, E. coli, they are, and Pseudomonas, Candida albicans. These are the pathogens which are multi-drug resistant, and they are principal cause of the nosocomial infection. So we should not go to we should avoid going to the hospital, because in hospital normally those people go who are terminally ill or seriously. Some of them, they may recover, but may leave the pathogen there. And similarly, if these things find place in the vectors or in the form of compromised food safety, and animals also, they get infected because the water is contaminated with this. The contaminated water contaminates the environment, and this contamination is actually passed on when people wash their vegetable with all in nala and rivers, and that's why, and feed the animal to animals. So these all pathogens are circulating into this, and ultimately they all are coming to the human beings. And obviously, even many cases are there where the doctor's son, who himself was a doctor, many, they died in the hands of their father. They couldn't save because there are no antibiotics left to treat them. Unfortunately, some of our irresponsible colleagues, they use the colistin into production. And some of the antibiotics they use for increasing the production of the animals. So this is also leading to the emergence of new pathogens in different settings. Even pharmaceuticals, they are discharging their waste directly into their rivers, and which is going and getting transferred into these AMR pathogens are getting transferred into different flora and fauna, and ultimately coming back through livestock chain, what we call as food chain, to the humans and domestic animals. Now we are left with no antibiotics to treat them, unfortunately. So deforestation and malaria, who should be on the One Health team? This is a major question. So many people. Veterinarian, physician, nurse, public health worker, epidemiologist, wildlife. Now here, individually when they work very good. But they say, I am the best. The problem is this, that you are not the best. You are the best. No, I am the best. And that is the problem. That's the problem. We have to appreciate on a humble note the contribution of others, and we should work as a team with a dedicated goal, with clear vision. So this is the team which makes One Health team. Otherwise, we will be just like blind persons, 6 blind persons who are just were having their own interpretations of an elephant. Somebody thinking a snake, somebody as a carpet, somebody like a sphere or tree or something like that, and just like a rope. That is the condition. So One Health, actually, it is concerned with the animal health, human health, and what is most often neglected is the animal health. So unless we take the environmentalists, the sanitation workers, and all those sanitary people who are engaged in the sanitary settings, and wildlife people, we can't achieve that goal. So One Health is essentially gives us a message of 3C: coordinate, communicate, and collaborate. If we actually honestly do it, then we can have a beautiful world to live in. And diagnostic leads taken by India, you know, the Faluda, this is actually a fictitious character, and the CSIR has developed this test. So India is also doing their best to develop a paper-based test, and here they are targeting another Kerala Institute, Sri Chitra. Like so many initiatives are being taken by humble and honest and dedicated hearts in the national interest, in the professional interest. Clinical trials are also going on various antiviral drugs. But to sum up, no evidence with regard to the companion animals has come, so we need not to worry much. But again, on a cautious note, we have to take care that this virus does not get settled in our domestic or wild population, so that it becomes a source of nuisance and a source which cannot be traced back, and always becomes a perennial source of infection. So we must build bridges among different disciplines, stakeholders, with economic parity and proper stewardship to create One Health. And this is the bioecology of the whole health system. If the environment is not taken care of, biodiversity is not taken care of. For example, the plant is stressed because soil is filthy, humus is not there, its health was not good, weather is not appropriate, irrigation is not timely or less, and thermal temperature is too high, drought and floods are coming to uproot, plant is stressed. Obviously, the microbes toxin it cannot expel. As a result, the toxins are accumulated, they become the carrier of disease, and horizontal gene flow occurs from these plant stress. So plant species itself is transferring the gene of which are from diseased seeds, and the phytonosis. These diseases are also go to animals and humans. Likewise, humans, environmental pollution, pesticide residue, heavy metal poisoning, and altered gene actions. They are becoming talk of the day. Every day we see it, and obviously they affect the humans and from animals, which is basically the emerging infectious diseases which moves on from wildlife to animal to livestock as they interact frequently. They affect the animals, and animals becomes a major source. Here comes our role. Nobody can replace our vital role, provided we are honest to our deeds, we are honest to our goals, and we can check them here so that they don't get spilled over to humans. And we ensure that environment is clean, it is protected, so that the healthy animals are raised, grown, and this food chain becomes healthy. unless all these three things are in line, it cannot. So in one, previously it was thought if a jungle is there, it is too dense, then it will help in the disease spread. This is a traditional perspective of biodiversity, that disease amplifies. But no, today is this, the dilution effect. Because of dilution effect, if we are having biodiversity rich, then if the biodiversity is rich, the disease will be diluted. Because so many, you can see here a tick, but if so many trees are there, it will be distributed. Likewise, so many species are available. But if the biodiversity is poor, you take the example of lime. Here, Borrelia burgdorferi, which is a spirochete, it will only find the mouse to live, not any other species. And ultimately, mice will carry this spirochete to the human beings, and the ticks will transfer it to the human beings. And that is how it is increasing. So basically, the host density, if it is decreased, if contact rate is decreased, and pathogen transmissibility, if these three have to be decreased, then the species diversity has to be increased, and then only disease transmission and prevalence will be reduced. Actually, it is the intervention of the human that has devastated the nature. And that's why the vaccine for COVID-19 is a natural habitat. It's a classical example of human. That pandemic is a great example of how badly we have treated the nature. To conclude, zoonosis and occupational health hazards are preventable, and indiscriminate use of antibiotics in livestock and poultry production leads to emergence of AMR. So we have to really work on ground on this issue. Public education, motivation, and participation is the key to One Health approach, provided we consider us as a family. For example, this whole body work, because the different organs work, all the parts, that's why this body works. Otherwise, individually, if works and grows, it is a cancer, which actually destroys the whole. So we have to decide in our professional settings, whether we want to be a cancer or we want to serve the whole through the One Health approach. And that's why biosecurity measures in poultry, animal, fish, and wildlife feeding in backyard and commercial settings becomes the need of the hour, but we have to work on ecological interventions. I would like to show this slide as a last slide, because if these three, if we are living with the nature, we are respecting the nature, we are protecting the nature, preserving the nature, then only we should see that these are the interventions. It means these are the holes. If these holes are available in the system, the pathogen will pass through. But here, what I mean to say, that for example, this is birds. So if they are there, if we check them somehow, the rabies will not come here. So what if some say that dogs should be vaccinated, they should be, their population should be brought under control by nature. And some say that livestock animals should be used, this leopard and all that. Why this color is coming? And finally, this is the thing which we have given here, that long back we were given a task that how a model program can be made. So this is one, that Ministry of Environment and Forest, if they have linkage with Ministry of Health and all they work at a ground level with the Ministry of Agriculture, we have proposed at that point of time National Institute of VPH. This is long back, I am talking of 2005 and 6. And then only we can have a national authority for disaster surveillance and monitoring of natural disasters, including zoonotic disease. Because unless there is an authority, we can't work. I don't know where from this has come on the screen, sorry, I don't know. This is the time and facts, not to fear, not to spread rumors, and not to say spread stigma. And finally, if we have got guts and we have got commitment to crack the shell, if very bright, very hopeful future awaits us. With this, I end up my presentation and thank every one of you for joining and listening to me. I have a great hopes that you will carry this message forward to all your colleagues, students, and all those who are professionals, I call them in one word, to the one and common in order to educate them so that we earn the respect for our own profession. I would like to thank the God Almighty above and near here. Parvade, Dr. Pankaj, they have been a tremendous help, like my all very esteemed colleagues and very dear students who have helped me to make these beautiful slides. Probably you might have enjoyed.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Indeed, it is one of the best presentation I can say. And not only this is my view. This view I am reading after going through the chats, which are going on sideways. And almost everyone is writing this is one of the most informative lecture because all we are facing the problem of COVID, and you have made this subject very easy to understand, that how we can intervene and how the cycle can be little bit we can halt. So it has become very informative to each and everyone, and everyone has passed this message that I'm communicating on their behalf to you, because we cannot interact with each and everyone. Some restrictions are there.
So I have taken a bit more time, although I tried to cover, but I am thankful to all of
But because we have also not come in between that your lecture, because it was going so smooth, and that's why we have not everyone was writing that this is very good, so we thought let it go, and they are getting some good information. And the house is very good. More than 150 participants are still there, they are listening you. So thank you very much, Dr. Malik, for sparing time and giving such a good informative lecture. There are just a few queries I am taking from some of my colleagues. If you can a little bit elaborate on that. This is the right time to have a One Health department, division, or the institute. What you like to say about that, sir? Constituting a One Health institute now, looking at so many diseases are coming, and isolation working will not solve any problem.
Yeah, actually, One Health Institute is basically this. It is already there. See, in settings, if we take CDC, if we take Public Health Laboratory Services, Colindale, UK, you take any country, they are already working in this mode. India needs to work in this mode. Because if they find this kind of solution, like One Health Institute, that is fantastic. Because probably can shun off their, they can shed off their egos, professional egos, personal egos, interest, and probably can, if we all join hands, we are a wonderful workforce, I tell you. So if this kind of any setting is made, in any setting, veterinarians are, I remember my good friend, and he was my student, very dedicated Dr. Bhargava. Lifelong he has worked for this. Lifelong to see that this kind of institute comes. It is in the larger professional interest, not something personal. So this is need of the hour. Unless we do, otherwise what we will do, we will say, okay, we have done this thing, we can do, we cannot do. So this is not going to solve the problem. Let us solve the problem by joining hands. As I said, we should work like a body where every part is important. Every part is important.
One question is about the risk of transmission through milking. The person handler is having COVID. So how much, what precautions we must follow during that time?
The risk of getting
transmission of this COVID. If the person, the handler of milking person is having COVID.
See, take home message is this, that everybody should wear the mask. Number one, to contract the disease, to minimize the chance. And second, if somehow I see anybody may be asymptomatic carrier. So everybody should wear a mask. And when suppose the virus has come to the milk has to be boiled. So everything will be finished. That's not a problem. And the virus does not grow in any livestock. I mean, any livestock species. So it is not going to be excreted in the milk. So what we have to take care that wash our hands, everything, and boil the milk and enjoy. I hope I am clear.
Yes, sir. Definitely, we have to be more cautious when handling such issues and take all social distancing, all the advisories of the government, international health agencies. So all we have to be following all of them. So now I go with Dr. Srikant is going with Dr. Umesh.
No, sir. Dr. Kadian sir is there. Srikant sir is joined.
I don't know who is going with both of them.
I think Dr. Kadian sir will give a note.
Okay,
First
so
talk.
thank you very much, sir. And I request now Dr. Kadian to please give his remarks.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks to one and all.
Thank you, sir.
Respected Dr. SVS Malik, the best scientific brain I have ever met in my life.
Thank you. I am humbled.
Your lecture simply overwhelmed everybody. We kept on sitting for 1.5 hours, simply did not want to move away. Otherwise, most of the webinars I shirk away because I was a poor student. But
My
sir,
good
the
fortune.
way you dealt with this topic is totally admirable and appreciated by everybody. Such a big house, and you even, like we tell, the audience was unmoved.
Thank you.
And Dr. Saab, this is the one concept which needs to be dwelt upon. I had known only 3: veterinarian, the human doctor, and the environmentalist. But the way you explained at least 12 competencies, that is far more easier and able to be dealt with. That will be the most comprehensive approach. We had a concept note from Dr. Ajit Singh Jakhad, Professor Emeritus from Luwas. And on that concept note, we had recommended to the Department of Animal Husbandry and through them to the ICMR. But we need to create another authority that should involve all these components. And naturally, now the country is so much afraid of corona that we need to have a very comprehensive approach. I thank all the participants joining today, Dr. SVS Malik, and would like to share with everybody that VCI elections are on. We at Indian Veterinary Association are contesting the elections as Team 11. Team 11 will be sounded, most of we have been conveying to everybody, includes personnel from all sectors. We have Dr. R.S. Patel, Dr. Mahesh Yadav, Dr. Pramod Pawar, he's a microbiologist, Dr. Jitendra Prasad, pet practitioner, Dr. Patra Subhol Chandra from West Bengal, and administrator, Dr. Elang, administrator cum sportsperson, Dr. Srikant, not a graduate doctor like us, but a PhD, Dr. Pono Pandian, very simple, humble man, Dr. BNS Murthy from Karnataka, and our webinar series organizer, Dr. Sontake Umesh Balaji. Today, what I have felt is the Indian Veterinary Association should bear more social responsibility, and definitely Dr. Malik, Yashpal Malik, the junior Malik today, he is the, like in Hindi we call law. ये हमारे वेबिनार सीरीज की लॉ है जो चलती रहेगी. In the coming time also, IVA takes it upon its responsibilities that we will continue the webinar series at least for 1 year, or possibly it will be a permanent feature, not a feature just for the election purpose. We have been doing it for last 15 or 16, 20th April was first, 20th and 21st, we will be having speakers from US, and definitely we will try to make it a big platform, bigger platform than Veterinary Council of India, because we don't have any constraints, and the scientific portion will be continue to be headed by Dr. Yashpal Malik, and it was the find of that day that he called Dr. S.V.S. Malik. One issue we will continue to deliberate with the House. The today's issue that we want to deliberate is, every time I speak about Section 30 of Indian Veterinary Council Act, but nobody or majority of the people are not able to understand the consequences of Section 30B of Indian Veterinary Council Act. Today, I got a remark on the Facebook that Dr. webinars are okay, but what about the job prospects? Our faculty, honorable faculty members, our honorable leaders of the profession, this is a big question in front of everybody to answer. What will happen to more than 15,000 to 20,000 unemployed veterinarians, a great technical force with the government? We need to create avenues for them. And this Section 30B implementation is going to be the way out when we are going to have a registered veterinary practitioner, a graduate practitioner at helm of affairs at all the dispensaries, stockman centers, first aid centers of the country. Government cannot compromise on the social sector services. Maybe we can do away with the concept of paraprofessionals, but the main concept is to be the technical man who should provide the best possible services. Animals also deserve specialist services as humans. So this issue will be on the top agenda of the Indian Veterinary Association. Possibly we will see to it, the whole team, it is not only going to be 11 members. VCI is such a platform that we need to have at least 5 to 6 committees, or more than 10 to 10 or so. The funds with the VCI are ad lib and can be cultivated. But we need to have specialist committees, group of people, strategic focus groups we will be creating. And those strategic focus group, they will be giving the recommendations, and the VCI will be following them. Our team 11 will be following them if given a chance by the veterinary fraternity of the country. It is a big constituency of 50,000 or more veterinarians. It is by grace of God that we got this notion, filed a PIL, and you will be surprised all the way VCI was working was, after 2013, there was no Indian veterinary practitioner register. And we did not have anybody on any record. And if anybody would have challenged, it would have been a very big serious issue in the corporate world, in the outside world, that we were not even registered after 2013, which many youngsters would have faced this position. So Section 30B is going to be the boon for this technical workforce. VCI has a very important component. One nominee from Indian Veterinary Association and one nominee from State Veterinary Association, one nominee from State Veterinary Councils. These three people are the one who are directly connected to the veterinary council. Last time I am a registrar of a state council. For the whole tenure except one meeting of state registrars, there was not even a single communications with anybody. State associations never got a chance to come to Delhi or to deliberate on any issues.
By this, sir.
We commit that all the strategic focus groups will be calling them SFGs. SFGs will be working, and we will be very able arms of the department, because there we have the veterinarian's role is putting up files and schemes only, cut and paste job. But our SFGs of ECI, SFGs of Indian Veterinary Association, they will be making recommendations to the government, and those recommendations we will follow up. The present government, led by Honorable Narendra Modi ji, they are very receptive to the things. I think unofficially I share with you that we have more than 10 DO letters pending with the government, with the VCI structure regarding amendments in the IVC Act 1984, in which we never had amendment for last 36 years or more. So, promising you a bright future, achhe din. Team 11 wants you all to be the brand ambassadors of IVA. The big constituency we may not be able to approach, but we will try to approach on SMS, WhatsApp, and other emails. And we are freely available, and for all our updates, we request you to visit www.drkadyan.com, which is sponsoring agency for this webinar series. Please, it is the last opportunity, and a meme which we shared yesterday, कि ले लो BVSC course में दाखला, भविष्य सुरक्षित है, your future is secure. And when the person gets the graduation degree and is very happy, he finds the future bleak. No jobs except writing on Twitters, emails, sharing on Facebook, Instagram. The problems keep on arising, which we tasted even a victory with the students of Himachal Pradesh, Palanpur Veterinary College. They launched a big struggle, and I congratulate them on their success, that they have been able to get the postgraduate and PhD seats restored. Indian Veterinary Association simply says Abhinandan and Naman to them, and led by a lady, Nidhika Bhatia, the surprise lady who led the struggle. Congratulations to them. Now we have trouble brewing in Gujarat, where the privatization of mobile veterinary dispensaries is being undertaken. Indian Veterinary Association is supporting them, and we are strongly against the privatization of veterinary services, because it is the youngsters. The youngsters need jobs, and their parents are waiting. Their parents have waited for a long to see their wards as doctors, and not workers, simple workers, to be paid 20,000, 30,000 and for 12-hour duration. Through this platform also, we express our solidarity with the agitating veterinary doctors of Gujarat, we strongly support for the Rajasthan veterinarians so that they should be given a chance through RPSC, for which we had served a legal notice to Government of Rajasthan and RPSC, and we have got a reply from RPSC that they are following up with that case, looking into the consideration of COVID, but naturally we will send a rejoinder to them. The problem of employment is very grave even in UP, Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, agitation where we supported them financially, we supported them morally, and our dynamic leader, Dr. Babita Tripathi, IVA MP, or as some people, as our Indian Veterinary Association name could not be registered, so it was registered as Progressive Veterinary Doctors Welfare Association, which is running the IVA MP. And IVA MP is a political welfare wing of Progressive Veterinary Doctors Welfare Association MP. So what we want is a cohesive force of field veterinarians. Today, the most of the participants belong to the elite PG students, PhD students, scientists, and we want everybody to be a participant in the rejuvenation of this veterinary profession. So we request that please be the ambassadors, fight these elections with full might, and definitely the success will be ours. It will not be of the team 11, it will be of the country's veterinarians. We promise total responsiveness to the problems even of a single veterinarian. Thank you everybody who all joined us, and even I would request Dr. SVS Malik through this platform that we would like to have him on our webinar series once again, say after a period of 1 month or so, and definitely the audience will be much more. And Dr. SVS Malik, he can have even a meeting of some of the specialist panel discussions. And now Dr. Balaji, rather Sontake Umesh Balaji, what he has to offer, to request you for. Dr. Sontake, please. Jai Hind, Jai Vet, the new Nara of IVA. Thank you everybody dear.
Your nice word and all giving the sketch of your plans. I wish you all the best success to the team 11, and I'll be glad to be associated with this endeavor of knowledge sharing with all my professional colleagues in the time to come. I thank especially all my esteemed colleagues, Dr. YPS Malik, and you all, Dr. Daya, Dr. Umesh, and all. So, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to interact with my professional colleagues to whom I love most. Thank you very much.
Thank you sir. चलो, चला दो। आवाज तो नहीं आ रही। आवाज।
We are listening to you, Dr. Kadian.
Yes sir.
You are audible. Your efforts are also, you have, it's good that you have given all your plans and the progress made by this platform.
Sir, it is a humble attempt to revive this very great profession.
Please keep it up. My best wishes.
Thank you, sir, for your blessings. Thank you again, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you everyone for attending participating the international veterinary webinar. I will request Yashpal Malik sir to give a last note of this session. Malik sir, Yashpal Malik sir. Okay, Vinod, can you close the session, please? End the session, please. Thank you. Thank you, sir.